My wife and her charming buddy decided to gamble with my business and my life, leaving me with nothing. They thought I'd just sit on the sidelines while they divided up the spoils behind my back. But when I gave them a taste of their own medicine, they clearly didn't see it coming. And that was just the beginning. My name is James, I'm 34, and I'd say life was going just fine. My wife, Alice, 32, and I owned a small but profitable family business. We'd built from scratch. It wasn't always easy, sure, but that's normal, right? I thought Alice and I had a solid, equal partnership. We both knew how much effort it had taken to build this business. We shared a common goal, and I, ever the optimist, believed our bond was as strong as any contract. Then one day, by sheer chance, I walked into the office and saw her laptop sitting open on the desk. Right there, practically an invitation. Now, I don't usually pry into her email, but honestly, she'd left it right out in the open, almost as if she wanted me to see something. I figured I'd just check for some work files. But instead, well, imagine this. I open her inbox and find an email thread with a certain Richard. Oh yes, that Richard, our friendly competitor, a man I can't stand. And why on earth was he emailing her? So I keep reading, and the more I read, the more it feels like I've stepped into a surreal nightmare. They were discussing the sale of our company, my baby, my business. And apparently, they were planning to sell it all, leaving me in the dust. Picture it. You're working hard, giving up weekends, planning your future, and your wife is calmly planning to sell it all. To her buddy Richard. Ironic, isn't it? Alice, my loving wife, was about to sell me off with the business like some useless asset. Well, suddenly it was clear who the real useless asset was. I froze in place, my heart pounding, thinking I was going to blow my cover. But then I realized I had a chance to play my own game, and I knew I'd need proof. So I closed her laptop and pretended I hadn't seen a thing. I decided to stay quiet, keep my cool. But inside, I was boiling. I knew if they planned to leave me with nothing, I sure wasn't going to let them have it all. My game had just begun. Imagine this. I come home, smiling like nothing's wrong, playing the part of the perfect husband. To Alice, I'm now a Hollywood-level actor, putting up with betrayal and acting like I'm blissfully unaware. Inside, though, I'm simmering. But I hold it together because I know it'll take time to gather the solid proof I need. Clear, undeniable evidence that she's ready to ditch me for that Richard. It was obvious a simple, "we have a problem," wouldn't cut it. So I quickly set up monitoring on her computer, something that would send me a copy of everything she wrote. And as I read their messages, it was all there. Alice couldn't wait to start a new chapter in her life. A new chapter, huh? Just wait, sweetheart. This plot's about to take a twist you won't see coming. I started piecing together every little detail, like a puzzle. Every night I read their messages, getting the full picture of their plans. And the more I learned, the clearer it was that they were planning to hide income from me. You can guess what that means, right? Alice was scheming to leave me with nothing. I mean, seriously, does anyone really think they'll get away with this? They were discussing financial tricks like it was a picnic, not an attempt to screw over someone they'd been with for nearly a decade. Of course, information alone wasn't enough. Just showing up and saying, "Hey, here's your cute little plan to wreck my business," wasn't an option. I needed concrete evidence, and that's when I decided it was time to call in a professional. I contacted a lawyer I'd worked with before. He was stunned by the whole story, but quickly pulled himself together and told me I already had the groundwork for a case. I just needed a bit more. "James, you'll need documented proof that this is a coordinated setup behind your back," he said. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was already savoring the thought of making them both squirm with what I had on them. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was building a strategy. It had been over a week, and I was still putting on a happy face, as if nothing was happening. Alice, it seemed, thought I was blissfully unaware and had no idea that her plans were about to come crashing down. She didn't realize I was copying every document, every message, every detail. Just the other day, I accidentally overheard her on the phone with Richard. Yes, him again. And realized they'd already sealed the deal. Alice had given him complete financial information about our company. She honestly thought she could go through with this scheme so easily. They must have thought I was blind or just plain dumb. Well, who'd have guessed it would be so easy? Once I realized they'd exchanged all the necessary information, I started acting. Emails, contracts, money distribution plans. I made duplicates of everything. Like a real detective, I had every file neatly stored. My little jackpot. Honestly, it was kind of amusing. Alice thought she was pulling a fast one on me, but in reality, let's just say it was the opposite. During another meeting with my lawyer, I showed him all these love letters between Alice and Richard. He was flabbergasted. He explained that if I could prove she was sharing company data with a competitor without my knowledge, I might just be able to keep my stake, if not the whole business. Isn't that sweet? I had an entire plan spinning in my head. I knew it was time to show that I was more than ready for the next move. I wasn't just waiting for a hit, I was preparing one. Now I had an entire collection of evidence, a virtual scrapbook of their betrayal. Honestly, I was starting to feel like a character in a thriller. Only instead of a bulletproof suit, I had a stack of documents. It was time to go on the offensive. Evidence alone wasn't enough. I knew I'd need allies inside the company if I wanted to pull off the kind of coup Alice wouldn't see coming. First, I reached out to Tom. He's our investor, a reliable guy, a little quirky, but sharp as a tack. We'd always gotten along well, and I knew if anyone would be on my side, it'd be him. I arranged a meeting at some nondescript cafe because, honestly, I was starting to feel paranoid. The moment I told him everything, Tom leaned back and just said, "You're not kidding, are you?" I smirked and showed him a few of the artifacts I'd gathered. Messages, financial schemes, data sharing with the competitor. Tom just whistled and said, "Well, James, looks like we're gearing up for a war." I liked the sound of that. Tom and I decided I'd take charge of the company finances. And I'll admit, it wasn't easy. Alice clearly sensed something, as her usual access to the funds suddenly got tighter. She came home increasingly suspicious, casually dropping phrases like, "You haven't taken on any new projects lately, have you?" Or, "You sure have a lot of work going on these days." I just shrugged her off, saying, "Nah, just working like usual. We're a team, right?" But inside I was laughing. A team, huh? Each on their own side. Alice thought she still had everything under control. She believed I was completely in the dark, that she had it all handled, and it seemed she'd even convinced herself. Naivety makes a fine ally when you're preparing to land the decisive blow. Every day, I regained a bit more control, quietly blocking her attempts to access the company resources each time. And so, it began. Alice finally realized something was wrong when her usual access to the finances was suddenly, let's say, restricted. At first, she assumed it was some sort of mistake. Could her calm, easygoing James really have blocked something? But after trying to log in from a third device and seeing the same access denied message, it started to sink in. When I got home, Alice was already in full storm mode. She burst into the room without a greeting and fired off. "What's going on? Why can't I get into our accounts?" Oh, how sweet. Our accounts. It almost sounded like a joke. I put on my best clueless face and said, "Oh, strange. Maybe the bank updated something? I'll check it out. Don't worry." That bought me a whole minute. She started to get angrier, escalating with arguments like, "This is my business too. I have every right to the finances," and even made some attempt to explain how she only wanted what was best for the company. Oh, sure, that's why she was planning to sell it behind my back, right? I stayed calm. "Alice, listen," I said. "I'm just trying to do what's best for both of us. You know I've always wanted things to be open and fair." The irony was thick, but she didn't seem to catch it. After that, I decided it was time to take things up a notch. I changed every password on the accounts and left a little note on her computer. A classic cheesy movie move. Any attempt to sell the company without my knowledge will be considered fraud. Short, clear, and crystal precise. Perfect. At that point, she didn't stand a chance of proving her innocence, as all the paper trails and messages led back to me. Alice started searching for loopholes, but I was always one step ahead. The more she struggled, the more confident I felt that I held all the cards. Ah, here we get to the sweet part. After all the back and forth with passwords, access limits, and those accidental threats left on her computer, I finally felt like things were in place. I had full control, support from key people in the company, and most importantly, all the evidence. So it was time to move to the final part of my plan, the sale. Since Alice had fixed her attention on Richard, I decided to surprise her by negotiating with George. George was another competitor who'd had his eye on our business for years, a savvy old-timer in the deal-making world, and he certainly wasn't going to pass up a good opportunity. We met up in some discreet restaurant where serious deals are usually made, and I laid it all out for him. He was ready for this, slipping on his best negotiation face. "Look, George," I told him, "here's your chance, and it's a good one. I'd rather sell the business to you than to some two-bit hack who cheats with other men's wives. Deal?" Of course, George caught on quick. I offered him a solid deal with a slight catch. The price was a bit under market value, but in exchange, he'd gain full control over the company right away. A dream deal, wouldn't you say? We agreed on everything, shook hands, and I knew I'd just taken my first real step toward a full win. Meanwhile, Alice was still blissfully unaware, thinking her brilliant scheme to sell the company was going smoothly. But within a few days, she began noticing strange numbers in the financial reports. It made sense. I'd left a few small clues to throw her off track. She tried to get answers, requested access, demanded reports, but I'd locked everything down. She was bewildered, her eyes darting around like someone who suddenly realized the ground is gone from under them. Each time she asked, "James, what's going on with these transactions?" I'd just shrug and say, "Must be the new reporting system. Nothing to worry about." Inside, I was already celebrating. Alice was like a mouse in a maze, and I enjoyed every second of watching her scramble for an escape. The day finally came to put everything in place, and let's just say, for some people, the reality hit like a truck. George and I sat in his office, papers spread across the desk, pens in hand. A few last signatures, and it was done. I watched George sign with a grin, feeling like I was in a movie where the hero finally beats the villains. Except this time, the villain didn't even know she'd been playing by someone else's rules. That evening, I came home acting as if I were just my usual, laid-back self, like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Maybe just another day at the office. But Alice was clearly on edge. She tried bringing up certain things about the business that she thought we needed to discuss. She looked at me like she was testing how much I knew. I could see fear starting to creep in, and honestly, it gave me a thrill. When she asked if everything was okay, I replied with a relaxed smile. "Oh yes, everything's great. By the way, I found a new partner who's interested in working with us." Her face contorted, like she'd just seen a ghost. She was trying to say something, but only fragments came out. "What, new partner? You never said—" I just shrugged. Just thought it was a good opportunity. Always good to have a backup plan, you know. The next day, George and I signed all the final documents. The deal was done, and George officially owned the business, while I walked away a satisfied man who'd managed to rid myself of two problems at once. Alice, she got exactly what she deserved. Nothing. Richard got nothing too. The look on Alice's face when she realized her plans had completely fallen apart was priceless. She looked at me like I was her last lifeline, and it had just snapped. Watching her realization that her entire scheme had amounted to nothing was a moment of pure victory. Yes, this time, I'd won. And here it is, the grand finale, the cherry on this bitter cake. The deal with George was done, and I held the final piece of the puzzle. The divorce papers. You know the classic movie line, "It's payback time." That was exactly how I felt. So I walked into the house with a stack of papers in hand, ready to put the final period on this saga. Alice noticed I had something for her, and her expression shifted. She obviously didn't expect this twist, and I could see worry growing inside her. But as for me, I couldn't care less. I handed her the papers and started explaining. "You know, Alice, while you and your pal Richard were scheming, I was working on a much cooler plan." She started to pale, but tried to keep her composure. "You thought you had me fooled? Sweetheart, you've got a lot to learn. At first, there was confusion in her eyes, but as I went on, fear replaced it. I laid out every card on the table, how I'd monitored her emails, gathered evidence, contacted George, and sold the business right under her nose. She tried to interrupt, saying, "James, you don't understand. It's not what you think." But honestly, I had zero interest in hearing her excuses. Her attempts were laughable. The whole scene felt like a play where the actress had forgotten her lines. I showed her the last page, the divorce papers. "Here, sign it. Think of it as the final step in your failed plan." She looked stunned, realizing she'd lost. She signed it, but the look on her face was priceless. Complete defeat, a mix of shock and helplessness. She was left with nothing. No business, no money, and perhaps most painfully, no one left to stand by her. I took the papers, packed up my things, and left her. For good this time.